And it's our very distinct honor and our privilege to have as our next guest, Congressman Bobby Scott, who is chairman of the Education and Labor Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. Chairman Scott has represented Virginia's 3rd Congressional District since 1993. And prior to his service in Congress, Mr. Scott served in the Virginia House of Delegates from 1978 to 1983, and in the Senate of Virginia from 1983 to 1993. Chairman Scott, thank you for taking time to be with us today and speaking to State Board of Education members from across the country. But most importantly, thank you for your leadership and efforts to build the capacity of states, districts, and schools, work which has been instrumental to mitigate the deleterious effects of the pandemic on student learning. We sincerely appreciate your advocacy on behalf of the students that our members serve each and every day. So again, we so appreciate you being with us. We look forward to your comments. And again, just thank you so much for your continued advocacy for the students of our states that we serve.
Well, thank you very much, Robert, for your kind introduction, and thank you for your years of leadership and education reform. I'm sorry I couldn't join with you for the duration of this year's conference, but I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I want to start by recognizing all of the NASBE members, especially those from the Virginia Board of Education, for everything that you do in support of our students, particularly during this pandemic. Across the country, state education leaders have worked hard to overcome historic challenges to maintaining students' access to education and preparing schools to reopen. I mean, we know that in-person instruction is critical to students. They do much better academically when it's in-person instruction. They have access to nutrition with the school lunches and school breakfasts. They benefit from social and emotional learning, which they don't get looking at a screen from home. And we have the ability to identify child abuse and neglect and mental health problems when the children come to school. And let's get serious, we're not going to open the economy until we actually open the schools. So there's no debate on whether or not the schools need to be open. The question is, can we open them safely? And the challenge is to determine how and when schools can bring students back to the classroom safely. State education leaders and school superintendents have a difficult challenge in working with the public health experts and communities to determine what works best for our schools. But we also know that resources are needed to safely open our schools and comply with the CDC guidelines. So I'm pleased to report that thanks to the hard work of Congress and especially the Committee on Education and Labor, help is on the way. Just a few weeks ago, President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan, which makes the most significant one-time investment from the federal government in K-12 education in our nation's history. School leaders have made it clear that without the $130 billion in this package, they would not be able to afford the steps to open safely and protect the students and staff or address lost learning time. Schools need this money to purchase personal protective equipment for students and staff, disinfect, they need to buy disinfectant to clean the school, and staff, because the schools won't disinfect themselves. We need relief to expand transportation services and prevent overcrowded buses. Fewer students on each bus means more bus rides, and that takes additional resources. And if students had to maintain social distances, it probably means fewer students in each class, smaller classrooms, smaller class sizes, as this group knows, cost money. We also need funding to fix dangerously outdated school facilities. According to the GAL, 54% of public school districts need to fix multiple building systems, and roughly 41% need to fix HVAC systems in at least half their schools. This is significant because the CDC has identified proper ventilation as an essential factor in safety during the pandemic caused by airborne disease. And it's hard to imagine how a school can operate during a pandemic without school nurses. All of this takes resources. And so schools need funding and the funding in the American Rescue Plan to implement other strategies, all of these strategies recommended by the CDC. And so, like I said, as President Biden said, help is on the way. I also want to, while we're talking, we want to say a word about statewide assessments. Because of the challenges caused by this pandemic, it is important to provide schools with flexibilities in addition to resources to recover and open safely. The flexibilities announced by the Department of Education and recently reaffirmed by Secretary Cardona can help states administer assessments safely this spring. These assessments are critical for identifying inequity and determining where to strategically target resources that will help close achievement gaps. As businesses have frequently told us, you cannot manage what you do not measure. And that's why at least 20% of the funding the schools receive under the American Rescue Plan and 5% of the funding the states receive must be used to address severe impact of lost time in the classroom. And obviously, before and after assessments will show us how well we did with the unprecedented funding found in all of the COVID relief bills, especially the American Rescue Plan. Now, this is a down payment in confronting an issue that will require us to use data from statewide assessments to understand the full scope of the problem and also the basis for continued federal investment. Across the country, state and local leaders like you have been calling on Congress to provide urgent relief to support our nation's students. By passing the American Rescue Plan, we took an important step towards answering that call. And we did it in such a way that we followed the Title I formula plan to make sure the money went where it is most needed. So we know there's still much more to do to support school communities and expand educational equity for students. But I want to thank you for all of your leadership and look forward to continuing our work together to ensure that our schools have what they need to empower students to reach their full potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Scott. It's just it's a pleasure to have you with us. And many of the issues that you have just outlined in your comments are the very issues that state boards are talking about every single month at every single meeting. And so you've hit the pulse of exactly what our members are talking about. But if I might, let me ask you one question that is, if you could tell today, you have members here from just about every state in the union. If you could ask them next month when they meet, one topic or one question you'd think that they should be talking about at this particular time, what do you think that should be that number one thing that rises to the top right now?
Well, I think the important issue would be achievement gaps. We know that just like they talk about in health, those with health disparities fared worse during the pandemic. The health disparities were exacerbated by the pandemic. Likewise, the achievement gaps, we believe, have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Those at the lower end of the achievement gap have fared a lot worse than others. We need the assessments to see how bad it is. But knowing this, that's why the Title I formula was so important, because the money goes where it's most needed. Now, in doing this, it puts us, we're way out on a limb, because quite frankly, some of the wealthier areas didn't do as well in the funding formula as the low-income areas. We've always known that low-income areas needed more, not less, that they've been getting. And the Title I formula accounts for this. And there's a lot of money involved, $130 billion, which is way more than whatever we do every year ordinarily. And it's, we need to be able to show we did something with it. And if you measure and show how bad it is, and then next year show how well we did with the money, it puts us in a position to say, see what happens. You should have been funding it all along. We can eliminate these achievement gaps if you just give us some money. If we don't have the assessments, then just give me some money isn't as strong an argument. And so we need those assessments. We need to address the achievement gaps. You know, if you look at the international measures, we have out of the top 40 or so countries, we're kind of in the middle, maybe drooping a little more than in the bottom half. But our upper income white students will be, if that was all we had, would be at the top. If we can eliminate the achievement gap, then we could all be at the top. But that's going to take some work. And we know that low income students come with a lot of different issues. It's more difficult. We have to put in a bigger effort. And that's why we have Title I. If we put in the effort, provide the resources, children can learn. And we have an opportunity to show if we put in the resources, they can learn as well as everybody else, and we can be at the top. If there's one issue that needs to be addressed, it would be achievement gaps.
Absolutely, Congressman, and we appreciate your continued focus on that very issue, as everything that state boards are talking about and everything that we do is focused entirely on equity and excellence. And that's we appreciate you keeping that at the fore. And we also want to say that we appreciate your cooperation during the last several months as these bills were making their way through, and your staff and you were just willing to listen to states and what states need, and very responsive to that. So thank you so much for that. And we hope that this isn't the end of the conversation, but just the beginning, as we now begin to build back and build back better. So.
Well, let's see how we do. The resources are there. There was debate about how to open. We have the money to reopen, not just to reopen safely. You need to fix the HVAC systems in a lot of the schools. You need to provide the PPE. You need the buses. You need to hire some nurses. I mean, there's a lot of things you've got to do. We have the money for it. Let's do it. But also, we need to make sure that not only do you open, you can stay open, but you deal with learning loss. We could have a generational problem. People just lost a year of learning. But if we make a special effort, we can catch up. That might mean summer school. That might mean longer school days in the fall. Things that, again, take resources. You know, the school boards hadn't budgeted for free summer school for everybody, or you can't expect people to just suddenly say, well, we're going to extend the school day without, you know, some compensation coming behind it. You know, they think we have the money for the only time in recent history. I think we've got the money to do what we want to do. So let's make it work. Let's educate the children, show that what we can do with these resources, and then we're in a real good position to explain how we should have been doing this all along. But if we don't do the correct for the learning loss, we had one member of our committee show an international study that shows that when students lose a year of learning through a war or whatever, that it affects the GDP of the whole country for years. You know, we just have to need to make that special effort. Let's catch up.
Absolutely. And we couldn't agree more. And we know that you're on a very tight schedule, and we know that you've carved out some time for us today. So we don't want to keep you any longer than you absolutely have to give us, but we just are so appreciative again of your leadership, appreciative of your support and your time today, and all those issues that you have just outlined. Every single one of them is appearing somewhere on our agenda over the next couple of days, where we're going to be delving into this and talking about those solutions, because those solutions that you've talked about are all contextual to each state, because each state's context is different and the needs are different. So we appreciate that flexibility.
When you come up with all those solutions, make sure you stay in communication with our staff so we know what to do.
Absolutely. We are hand in hand. We'll get this done, to Mr. Chairman. So,
thank you.
Thanks so much for your time today.
All right. Appreciate it.
We appreciate it so very much.